All right. Hey, everyone. I'm super excited to host this webinar today. The topic of the conversation is how do RevOps leaders control their outcomes and deliver ROI. My name is Sahil. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Rattle. Today, I am joined by three friends, first and foremost, to talk about this topic that is near and dear to all of our hearts. So, Rob, if you go to the next slide. So just to quickly introduce our panelists today. So we have Connor. Connor leads revenue operations at Twilio. Fun fact, Connor recently got promoted. Congratulations, Connor. I know that this happened just last week. Extremely well deserved. Connor has been part of the revenue ops world for more than a decade. So he has been at Twilio for, Connor, is it like more than 5 years now?
Yep.
Coming up 5 years?
Yeah, five and a half.
Yeah. So, and before that, Connor was leading revenue operations at Data.ai, previously known as App Annie, and Connor got his start at Bloomberg. So he worked for a couple of years in the finance world before shifting over to tech. Second, we have Alice. Alice and I have known each other for I think close to 3 years at this stage. Alice was one of the first 15 customers of Rattle. So she was one of the few people who took a chance on the platform, and she did. And I'm so glad. Alice, you know the interesting thing, Alice, when I was looking at your background today before researching for this webinar, I was surprised to see that you were in sales operations in 2007 at VeriSign.
Basically, before sales ops was a field.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing, which is I thought sales ops was coined somewhere in 2010s. I didn't know that the function existed in 2007. So, but Alice, our association began at Workboard, where you led RevOps, and today you lead CRM applications at this tiny company called AWS. I don't know if many people have heard of that, but it's okay. We'll give AWS some publicity today. And then we have David. David is a very good friend, is a champion of company, and someone that whenever I have a strategic question that I can't wrap my head around, I'll go to David for what would he do. But David has led revenue ops at Gong for David has been close to 3 years.
Yep, almost 2.5, 3 years, yeah.
Yeah, and then previously has worked at Built-in and LinkedIn. So I'm very excited for this conversation today with Connor, Alice, and David, and thanks for taking the time to join. The two things that the way that we decided on the panel was obviously we wanted some of the smartest people that we know in RevOps, and I think we were successful in curating a very smart group of folks for this. But the second thing was that if you look at the companies that are being represented today, all three companies are different stages in their growth. So AWS is tens of billions in revenue, tens of thousands of reps. Twilio is billions in revenue and thousands of reps. And then Gong is hundreds of millions in revenue and then hundreds of reps. So hopefully we have this pretty even mix of different perspectives from how do you go from one order of magnitude to the next. So with that, I would love to start, but just some housekeeping items. So this session is being recorded and we will share the session recording after the fact. And second is we have Q&A open. So if you have any questions while we're having this conversation, please feel free to post them in the Q&A, and either we'll get to it immediately or we have reserved 15 minutes towards the end to get to Q&A. So with that, the first thing that I would love to ask maybe I'll start with you, David, is mentors. So that's I would love to understand who has been the best mentor to you in your career, and what did they do?
I've had been fortunate to have a few. One of which taught me everything I know about sales, and I still stay very close to him. In one of my first roles in the sales landscape, I was an analyst, and just took me under his wing and taught me all about sales, really. Negotiations, talk tracks, messaging, the importance of buying circles. And so I had a really good foundation in sales, although I wasn't a salesperson myself. And then I think another really important person is actually my manager right now, who leads go-to-market operations and strategy at Gong. He's similar to Alice. I think he had the revenue operations title back in like 2008, 2009, and has been in the space for 20, 25 odd years at McAfee. And so he's kind of seen it and done it all and watched it evolve. And he's somebody who I can bounce ideas off of, whether it's something that he's directly in the know about or not, because he's just got that 30,000-foot view. So having those people that I can bounce ideas off of it's incredible. So I totally agree with your sentiment on mentors.
I will give a shout out to Brian Bayless as well, who is David's current boss, and just a phenomenal individual, and so much to learn there. But also a very kind person in everything that he does.
An incredible
hopefully,
too.
Yeah, we won't say this in front of Brian though. Alice, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm like David, I'm lucky enough to have my current boss as my mentor as well. But the secret is that he has been my boss 3 times before this as well. So I met him very early in my career, and we have a very good working relationship. Obviously, keep coming back to work for him over and over. But he's really, I appreciate him a lot because he has pushed me so much over my career. I didn't want to originally. I didn't want to be a people manager, and he just kind of was like, you can do it. You just do it. You just need to do it. And really forced my hand sometimes in places that I needed to grow, and was not willing to take the step myself. So that has had a huge impact on my career and my ability to do all the things I'm doing now. So I'm very grateful.
That's I resonate with the sentiment of being a people manager, and not just a work manager. Connor, and hey, if your current boss is not your mentor, we won't share the recording with them.
Yeah. I think I would kind of like book in, my career as well in terms of my mentors. I would say, in revenue operations, I started from more of the sales strategy and analytics background. And a gentleman by the name of Alejandro Martinez Vargas was the first person that taught me Tableau and opened up the world into like sales analytics, and gone on to teach a lot of people, analytical skills in Tableau, and ultimately, those skills that I passed on to other individuals is directly, because of him. In my current position, I would say it's actually my FP&A business partner, Jason Schukel. I think driving that collaboration, across the line of finance and go-to-market operations is super critical. And when it comes to, leading larger teams, the ability to learn from other individuals that have been able to motivate and drive impact with large groups is something that I've been really fortunate to learn from.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. Everyone, I know that this is not the topic that we are discussing today, but I wanted to start with mentors, because I hope everyone here has a mentor at work, outside of work, that you can rely on, because I think RevOps is such a new function, and the shared knowledge is not public as much as it should be. So there are individuals who have amazing depth by lived experiences. And I think if you do not have a mentor, I will highly recommend you find someone, or you can reach out to our amazing panelists, and and have someone who can guide you on this journey to become RevOps 2.0. Now, that's a good segue into our conversation for today. And Rob, you can stop sharing the screen. Thank you. But the conversation today is, how do you, as like we recently rolled out the latest version of Rattle, and we called it RevOps 2.0, which is how do you focus on outcomes and not just focus on projects and tooling, and how do you focus on the strategic work and less on the tactical work, which the urgent can crowd the important. If you'd love to understand what Rattle 2.0 is, we'll just post a link in chat where you can go and learn more. But that's the topic of the conversation today. So before we start on the topic, I have 3 questions that I would love to just quickly poll everyone. So the first is, do you have a RevOps function in your company, or it's sales ops, CS ops, and marketing ops separate? So if you can just take a second to reply either yes or no. Okay. And by the way, Rob is a producer of this webinar from Rattle's end. Rob, we can go to the second one. So the second question is who do you report to? So that's interesting. 33% people do have a RevOps function in the company. And I think RevOps is one of those things that became very prominent over the last couple of years. So maybe that's something that we can dive into. So the second is, who do you report into if you're part of sales ops or RevOps? Do you report to the CRO, the sales team, CFO, COO, IT, or other? Okay, Rob, if you have enough entries, let's see. Fascinating. I'm super glad to see that 0% have said that they report into IT. I think that's a great structure. And in fact, in one of the prep sessions for this webinar, we were talking about we hope that less than 10% report into CFO. Alice, do you want to just quickly talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I think, yeah, I mean, for me, the function, even though it has revenue in the title, the function is so tied to making the sales team successful. RevOps is about making sure that you're getting the information you need from the sales team so that the leadership can use that information in a way to do the planning, make the strategic decisions for the company, and without having a really close partnership with the sales team so that you're able to have honest conversations with them, influence the kind of information you want from them, influence their process a little bit, hopefully. It's hard to do that from like an outsider view. Sales does not like being told what to do by functions outside of sales, has been my experience. So coming at it from a more collaborative, we're all on the same team. We're all trying to do this. We're all trying to make sure we hit our numbers. Let's figure out the best way to do this together. Has been much more efficient in my experience.
Yeah, I love that. And then just the last question here, which is, what are 2 of your most burning problems? So you can only pick 2. But I know it's a long list of 9 options, but if you think really hard, not just for this quarter, but this whole year, this very weird year that we have all lived through. I still don't know if we can call it recession or not, but yeah, take a moment to look at the options and pick 2 of your most burning problems. All right, Rob, if we think we have gotten enough responses, let's see. I'm actually excited to see the responses. So what I can see, the top response is around, it's actually a pretty even split, by the way. It's 46% is never-ending ad hoc work. And then we have lack of process adherence and CRM hygiene, both at 34 and 35%. And then the third is, which are also quite close to each other, limited RevOps bandwidth and RevOps KPI. So thanks everyone for participating. So let's start with the biggest culprit here, which is ad hoc work. It's no surprise. The whole notion of RevOps 2.0 has been RevOps works on so many tactical things where when we join the function, we think we'll work on strategic items, but it ends up being AEs pinging and saying, hey, Salesforce is not working, or they ran into a validation rule, or the CEO suddenly wants a report, and I'm guilty of that, of asking my team, then they have to drop everything. David, I know from our conversation, you have a very interesting perspective on just day in the life of RevOps. What has Gong done?
Yeah, I don't think we've nailed it, but we're working through it, which is trying to balance that the ad hoc work. And I think it's a push and pull between strategic work and the operational work. And we're actually going through an evolution now of, potentially carving out the strategy from the ops because we have so much ad hoc work that comes up. And not just ad hoc work, I would say the less strategic work, managing comp plans and attainment each month, territory management, systems, reporting, lead management and flow, data enrichment. All of those things are big rocks that are very operational, that have a ton of ad hoc things that come up each month. Things break, things change. They're not the strategy, and it's not the seat at the table that I want RevOps to have. I want to be in the discussions of what's our sales capacity planning look like? What's our org chart look like for next year? What are the strategic changes we're going to make to actually drive the business forward? Where are we going to place strategic bets? What's our forecast look like? Are we going to hit our forecast? What are we going to need to do to change based on how the business outcome looks? Those are the conversations that if RevOps is a part of, then all of that other tactical stuff makes more sense. And you start thinking about the outcomes you need to drive in those rocks instead of, just putting your head down and say, I need to build 20 territories or build 100 territories. You have an understanding of the strategy from start to finish. And I want that seat at the table. And when I get sucked into the ad hoc work and any role I've had at my teams, they're not lifting their head above the water to actually focus on that strategy.
I would say that it's fascinating. I've never heard of anyone differentiating departments within RevOps as operations and strategy. Usually these are two very separate departments whenever I've seen this happen. David, I'm curious, how do you define who gets to work in which department? Is this more of their skill set, their seniority, their experience? How do you decide?
I think there's a skill set and there's a personality type. I think strategy is the business partnering. How can I work with you, Mr. or Mrs. Sales Leader? How can I work with you, Customer Success Leader, to distill all of the things that you need? And so you can be that utility player as well as have the tactical know-how to be really dangerous with data. But I think what we're trying to do is build center of excellences. So we've got places to essentially farm talent. We want people to become experts in some of these big rocks, and then they might grow into that strategic business partner. But that strategic business partner, I think, is where we're thinking as that's what's going to drive the strategy, and make sure that it moves through our revenue operation most effectively. And that's the move that we're trying to make right now.
I would be fascinating to see how it plays out. Alice, if I can tap you, you are on this very different end of spectrum, because the number of reps at AWS are in tens of thousands. I think it's public knowledge. And I can't imagine the number of tasks that would come the ops team, the CRM applications team. Give us a glimpse into, and surely you would have solved it. So can you tell us how you solved it?
Well, it is very different here because of the scale and the way AWS has grown very sort of quickly and organically. I don't know that I would actually suggest what we are doing, which is a really siloed approach. We have like a completely separate team handling strategy, a completely separate team handling operations. And then even though I manage the CRM or parts of the CRM, I don't have sales operations people in my group right now. So it's an interesting split that I am not, it's different than I'm used to having, where I have much more of a sort of holistic purview to be able to influence the other sides more. So it works in the sense that I am not in the weeds. I don't even have access to like the back end of the Salesforce org here, which is weird for me as a career admin. So it does certainly force me to be able to think strategically, because I am not able to be pulled into the weeds the way I have been when I've been the like single owner of everything together. But then it is a little bit harder to influence things like how the operations department is working and what their KPIs are versus what I think might be good, or what the sales, or which is a completely also siloed organization, is doing, or what they want. So it costs a little bit of attention having such a siloed approach. So I don't have the fix.
So it looks like I'm seeing a pattern. So it looks like we're seeing a pattern here, which is David just mentioned siloing operations and strategy, and Alice looks like that's what AWS employs as well. Although I understand that's not the most recommended approach, but your scale is also very few companies have.
So there's that.
Connor, is that similar at Twilio?
I think in some senses, like definitely the CRM systems administration team is rolls up to a different leader versus the rest of the revenue or go-to-market operations functions. And so I think that's always natural, because those are very two different skill sets, but ultimately that need to come together within my world. I think it's kind of a common question, right? Of like, I want to be doing that more strategic thinking, but I have to go and move David's accounts to Alice's territory, because David's now in a new role, and who better to do that than the business partner? Otherwise, it's a game of telephone. And I think there's got to be a reckoning that there's got to be some level of that amount of ad hoc work, because the sales function is a lot more nimble. It's not like we're planning a 2 to 3 year R&D roadmap. It's going to be like, we have a new opportunity, let's go after it. And I think what I really try to do, when driving alignment with my team, is I kind of reference a zippered component, and identifying all the individuals in the other group that you really need to be driving alignment at my level, all the way down, or all the way up. And that alignment, I think, can allow for clearer understanding of the priorities, and also a unity in those two groups to be able to push back, right? Where our leaders are going to come to us and say, hey, we need to do this, we got to do this. But there are the right moments when we need to push back and say, we don't need a 901st field in Salesforce to answer, one question. And so finding that balance, I think, takes some experience, and ultimately building those relationships with your peers, but also your stakeholders.
I guess then the tension between, it's the same business operations person who is being approached, let's say by you, Connor, where you have given them a project. I'm assuming that you work on a quarterly OKR cadence, where they have set priorities that they have to accomplish. But then this person will get approached by the team saying, hey, let's change some accounts, or some accounts were in the wrong name, or they would also be responsible for comp line, or calculating commissions. Is do you is there a formula there that hey, maybe 60% strategic work and then 40% we know that ad hoc work will come in? Or do you, is there a way in which you have designed the system so that AEs know which party to go to? So you're trying to solve this from the field rep side rather than the ops side?
I think the short answer is no, definitely haven't solved it. And I think it kind of speaks to the second kind of top rated poll question of like the lack of adherence to process. To me, that's really the output. And the input is the lack of understanding or being, that process being reinforced. And so, you're never going to get all of these individual tasks, into a perfect process. But I definitely see, as I look around my group and in historical revenue operations functions, they're definitely ripe to have better processes, more documented and communicated with the sellers, right? We don't want to bore them with process, but ultimately, the more they understand, I think the more adherence we'll see as well.
I don't know, the other thing that I'm curious in your perspective is the give and take of business partnering versus siloing. One thing I'm finding is the more business partnering we're doing, the more ad hoc there is, and the more deeper, and the more questions we're getting, because they think there's an outlet. And my hypothesis is that if I pull away from that we'll actually have more standardization in the business. We'll have more process adherence, because everyone will get less ability to like, hey, can I get this dashboard built? Can I get this field built? Because they don't have that outlet, and everything's a little bit more central. So that's the give and take that I'm curious. And you had mentioned that, having that business partnering as the person who's moving the territories, for example, is giving you like, you're so in the business, which I'm feeling my team is very in the business, but because they're so in the business, they're getting pulled into all types of things that I would not find strategic.
And that's where I think that coaching, comes into play. But I do think that business partner model, I think actually, if I in a pure black and white world, if I in the real world, it's a bit more complex, but a pure black and white world, I want to see more of it. From my enablement team, I want to see more defined business partners. From the field marketing teams, from maybe not product marketing, but they're aligned to products, right? And so to me, I think that relationship that you can drive allows for a lot more creative thinking, and even the ability for those individuals to push back and say, no, Alice, we don't, I'll go answer that question for you. And maybe I'm not going to scale it, but like, we are not going to add to the CRM just for this one ask. And so I think that's where I have centralized. And again, probably from my background, is I've centralized in the analytics function so that we are controlling the dashboarding and insights that we are producing at scale, and then enabling the rest of the operations and sellers to be able to use those dashboards or those insights so they can go and drive action, instead of building 9 different dashboards for 9 different sales leaders.
And I think one way to frame it that has helped me in the past is making sure that you keep really clear in your mind and your team's mind, who is your customer and who's your business partner. So my customer is the sales team. And so everything I do is going to be first and foremost to make sure that I am supporting the sales team and getting, the CRO, what they need out of the system and out of the process. And then as much as possible, folding in inputs from my business partners and, taking their advice and folding that into everything I'm doing, but having a pretty clear distinction of partner versus customer.
You know what I'm seeing a parallel here is product management. So I have built my career in product management, and there is always this tension in product management, which is there are things that you want to do, and then there are things that the customer needs. And sometimes the customer, and there is a very popular saying in product, which is listen to the customer for the problem, but never listen to the solution that they recommend. So I feel like it can apply into the RevOps world as well, which is what you are saying is obviously there are some operation tasks that you have to do, and those can be easily siloed in and be done on a regular cadence. But for things that come up that are very business oriented, it's almost like, obviously if it comes from CRO or the CEO, then you have to drop everything and do that. And I think CEOs and CROs should be more mindful of the work that they put their teams under. But if they come in from your stakeholder, which is the sales team, I feel like you have to listen to the problem and then look at it holistically and then solve that, rather than, oh, you want this new piece of information to be stored in the CRM, let me just create this thousand field in there. This is a good segue into the second most pressing challenge. And I'm actually very surprised that CRM hygiene and process adherence were both at the same level, 34%, 35%. And it's interesting that these are very interlinked to each other. Because if we think about it, today we are running our processes via CRM fields. So we have a field in CRM, and when it's filled, we know that this process was done. So it, again, like it's reality works in mysterious ways. It's interesting how both of them are pressing problems together. But Connor, you and I, we have had multiple conversations on process adherence. Give me a sense on what was the challenge, or what is the challenge that you have been trying to solve, and what are some of the novel ways that have worked, and what hasn't.
Yeah. I think I think it kind of goes back to a lack of defined sales process, and I think that's what I really have uncovered, this year at work, is that I think parts of the process are well understood, but the entire process is not well understood by a seller and even within our own revenue operations group. And ultimately, I think that process has grown and gotten to a point of a lack of understanding, is that it's kind of meandering through the sales force, or meandering to a deal being won, and not really a defined process. And so my big idea, my main focus is connecting our sales process into dedicated sales plays, into sales motions, because I think that can actually remove some unneeded process, and also really hyper focus our sellers and our operational teams on those North Star goals, right? We want to generate as many dollars as possible, right? But that's kind of a difficult thing to go do, right? You could do anything, right? And in reality, I can only imagine at Alice's scales, right? We have to be a lot more prescriptive, and I don't mean that in a way that is derogatory to our sellers at all. It's just that there is so much that could be sold in different avenues and personas and use cases that we need to go after, that we really need to lay down that sales process. So at Twilio, we sell communications APIs, so voice calls and text messages and emails, and there are a myriad of ways that you could go about selling those products. But what we're really trying to do is align our use cases and their products to a dedicated sales motion. And this is where Rattle has really come into picture at Twilio, of how I think we can better adhere to a process, visualize a process, and then most exciting to me is recognize the value of that process. Are we engaging in that process, or is this process a wasted wheel, right? Are we just adding an 18th wheel, 19th wheel to the car, and we don't need it at all? And so that's what I'm really excited about. So to answer your question, I wouldn't say I've nailed it and I have actually anything that I would say we've done right. We've kind of been successful despite it all, but I really think we can be even more successful and prove out that success, so we can repeat it in more defined ways when we are more clear about that process.
I think intuitive. Go ahead, Alice.
I could not agree more. I think it's like, this ties back to so many other things in RevOps that, like, how do you decide what KPIs to report on? How do you even translate those KPIs into real forecasts that are meaningful? It all starts with having a consistent process that people adhere to. So there's a whole conversation of then, how do you get people to adhere to the process? But it is just the foundation of everything. And it's hard because every sale is different. That is truly the case. Every single sales, every time you're going into a sales with a different company, it is going to be slightly different. It is not cookie cutter. We'd all be really successful salespeople hitting our quota every single, we'd all do it if it was that easy, but it's not. but finding the commonality so that 80% of what you're doing across all teams, across all selling motions is the same. So you have a repeatable motion. And then importantly, when I'm reporting up to my CRO, CFO, whoever, and I can say, here's what percentage of my deal is in, of my pipeline is in stage 2. It's true. Everyone knows this. Like, we all understand what stage 2 is in the same way. So we're able to forecast appropriately. So it ties into so many more things. That's the basis of it, I think.
I think, and David, just quickly, I just want to ask you one follow-up there, which is, and Connor, David, Alice, feel free to jump in. Obviously, Rattle is in the business of process execution. And this is the conversation that we have with hundreds of customers on a quarterly basis. The most common objection that we get, so there are two objections that we get. So one is our process is always changing. And the second, right? And the second is, and the reason I ask is this, because the people who are listening, they would get the same objections from their team. And the second is process more RevOps serving, or is process more AE serving? Which is, are we trying to implement process because RevOps wants to standardize so that they can report easily, or because, I mean, you said it, Alice, every deal is the same. So how do you respond to those two things when the CRO will say, but process is always changing, and is process for AEs or RevOps?
I can talk about it from, I think we're just coming out of startup phase. We're in the hundreds of millions, but it wasn't too long ago that, we were in the 50, 100 and scaling up from there, and everything was changing. It still is changing all the time. So much so that we have we've instituted a weekly go-to-market enablement meeting. The entire go-to-market organization goes to one meeting every week to get enabled on a thing, because things are changing that fast in this market with our product, with all these different things. So that means new processes are put into place always. We're doing an executive alignment program that's kicking off, and that's a new process that our executives are going to see a new process, our AEs are going to receive a new process. How do we facilitate that? Do we know if it's working? Do we know if it's being used? How do we kill things fast? Because we are adding more, and you can't just keep adding more plays and more plays and more plays. And so that's the constant struggle we're having. And so to me, it's a lot about like, how fast can I implement this process before there's a new shiny object? Because there's always a new shiny object. And so it's a lot about speed to execution. When our strategy is, we need an executive alignment process for all of our renewals over a certain amount, like how quick can we get this out the door? We want to enable the team on this next Wednesday. And like my team's ability to get that out quick is what helps make sure that we're rolling out a new process and there is alignment to that process, and we do have CRM hygiene, when we can execute that workflow and how we're going to do that really quickly. So in our business where we're moving so fast, if I can't keep up, I'll just have bad data and a lack of process. And it still happens for sure, but I'm constantly always trying to be mindful of, okay, is this a new play that we're running? How are we going to run this play? How are we going to report on it? And things like that.
I think your question, Sahil, if I could, and I agree with David, is that the speed is really the challenge. But I think that's like, that's the beauty in some ways as well, because right, you can see a lot of your impact in a quicker amount of time. Shoot, I lost my train of thought there. So your original question was, for the processes for the AE or for RevOps? And I think originally it was for RevOps, right?
Yeah.
We need to stand at the forecast call. We need to be able to communicate. And that's where I think I'm really trying to change that mindset, is like, no, the process is for the AE. So in David's example of this exec alignment, right? The executive is thinking, I want to drive alignment. I want to make sure I'm aware of these deals. In reality, the output of that should be AEs look at these deals where we drove exec alignment and the success of them compared to the rest of the portfolio. Now you need to be, that should get them excited about the process, or even raising their hand of, how do I get more exec alignment, or how do I drive maybe VP alignment, right? Maybe that's yet another process, but we got to prove out that process is really enabling our reps to be better, not just us be able to report on the business better.
Do you so when you're rolling out something, how do you think of piloting it with a small group?
Say the question again. How do you feel about piloting what?
So you have a sales team of 200 reps, and the CRO comes in and says, hey, from now on, we'll start doing this at stage 4, which is bring in a referral, a reference customer. How do you pilot that with a small group first? Like, do you even do that and then roll it out to the larger field?
Interesting. I haven't done it much for process, for things that affect the larger sales process. But I like conceptually, I do like piloting things because I am data driven. So I want to have, like, to Connor's point, I want to be able to tell people, hey, we did this and look at the outcome. You need to give like the what's in it for you. And here's the thing we did, and here's why it's successful. And I have proof, and like people at this company doing the thing you're doing, not just like some study from Forrester is telling me. But I mean, I guess a lot of it has to do with the size of your sales team. Like we at AWS, we do pilot things all the time because we have a bajillion different sectors we can pilot it in. But when I've had teams of under 200 salespeople, I don't think I did that. Not unless it was tool based. It's easy to turn on a tool for some people. But splitting the process in a smaller team, I think, is more challenging.
So I don't think we will have the time to go into it, and I want to go into the next topic. But one thing that I'll say that now, as Rattle is growing, what was very interesting to me was we thought we were going to change our process in the spirit of moving up market, and we instituted a new sales process and enabled the entire team on it. And then 3 months later, we found areas that were lacking. But then, obviously, we spent 3 months on enabling the whole team, and then we saw the whole team failing on those 2 or 3 critical junctures in the deal cycle. And now you have to fix that process and retrain the whole team, which, as you can imagine, is a nightmare. And you lose 6 to 9 months in the whole process. Like, even though the team size was at least at our scale is extremely small compared to Gong, and you're definitely compared to an AWS. It's just hard, and that's why process is like, we all know that processes are important, but it's just hard. But what I'll ask is, does bad process lead to bad data, or bad data leads to bad process, or are those not related to each other?
It's a circle, but it starts with process. Process is the funnel. Data is what you capture.
I'd say the strategy. You could have developed a great process, great data, shit strategy. French, but like, that's why the data is so important, right? So that you can go call the CROs baby ugly, which is a very hard thing to do without data. And so strategy is going to lead to process, but you got to have good data so that you can know if the strategy is good or bad.
So then, when anyone says that they have a challenge of CRM hygiene, does that mean that they actually have a challenge of reps not following the process, or reps not being enabled on the process?
I think it's a little bit of both. Yeah. And I think a lot of CRM hygiene, so a lot of it is we're not making it easy enough. So that's why I met you in the first place, is because I wanted to make it, I didn't want to have any of my reps have an excuse for something as dumb as close date in the past, right? Like there should be no excuse for that, but also I shouldn't expect my salespeople to be combing through list views every day to make sure that there's no data out of place. Like we should take that effort off the table, automate as much as possible. But then I think you need buy-in from your sales management that they're going to manage to the data that we've agreed we need. If we agree that this one process is super important and it's going to provide us with really good data, but it's not the easiest thing, like, it's not it takes additional steps for the salesperson. They're not going to do it if they don't have to. And the only people who can force them to do it is their sales leaders managing to that process and managing to, like, this is what we're doing. Every week we're going to look at your pipeline in relation to XYZ. We're going to look at how many of your deals you've actually checked the box that you have requested a resource at this stage, because that's going to be part of the KPIs that I evaluate you on now.
CRM hygiene can be could be so many things. A lot of what it is Alice is talking about. And so at Gong, we try to take the keying away from people as much as possible. So things like, this thing was said on a call and we know it, just go tag the opportunity. Like, I don't need the AE to go put that the main competitor is XYZ. Or things like close date in the past. Like, I'm just going to Slack the rep. Like, do you want us to just update this for you? And I know our reps don't want to open Salesforce, and they don't want to think about the administrative work. So it's a lot about that for hygiene. There's other whole can of hygiene, and I don't know exactly how the context of people answer this question, but it's around account data, contact data. I mean, my ecosystem is insanely complex now because we've had a variety of different vendors over the years, and that creates a whole other complexity with CRM hygiene, which that's my plague right now. Not necessarily the, can I get a rep to do a thing? Because Rattle helped us solve that piece at least.
Yeah, it obviously Rattle has a few hundred customers, and in the large pond of sales tool, I feel maybe 1% of people know about Rattle. So what I'm genuinely curious on is, how do people solve it without Rattle? How do people solve the challenge of CRM hygiene, and how do people solve the challenge of process adherence and execution and getting insights? So anyways, that's a question for a separate discussion. But maybe the last thing before we go to Q&A, and we have some amazing questions in the Q&A. Alice, can you quickly talk about RevOps KPIs, not just based on your AWS experience, but your experience over the last 15 years in RevOps? What should RevOps be measured on?
I think that I mean, the thing that I have always that's come down to for me is, I would get hired at these startups and they'd say, we can't trust our forecast. Please figure out forecasting. That was always like the baseline was, we can't trust the data. We can't understand the data. How do we get a real forecast? And how do we actually know how much money we're going to book this quarter? It was always like a mystery. So that's why I was saying, to Connor's point, that question cannot be answered without a defined sales process and then a consistent adherence to that process. So for me, if you're in an early stage place where you really don't have a very defined sales process, you haven't aligned on a sales methodology, you do have to start there. You have to make sure that your sales team agrees on a sales methodology first. How are we going to qualify our deals? And then build the process. For me, it's I use the CRM for that. Build the process, use tools that are going to make that easy for you, but make sure everyone is there's no excuse for somebody getting a deal to 75% and then oh, I don't know, it just kind of went away. Obviously we don't close every deal at 75%, but not this sort of just fluffy, I just felt like a 75, so I just put it there and I knew we needed more deals this quarter. You have to knock all of that out, and process adherence and definition and sales process definition is the only way to get there. And then you can start answering questions like, how much can I trust my forecast? And then start doing analytics around okay, what I've literally done this where I've exported giant amounts of data from the CRM to run, or okay, when we say a deal's in 10%, do we literally close 10% of those deals? Yes, no. Do we need to change our sales state or our percentages because I'm weighting this pipeline based on this percentage, and can we trust it? Yes, no. So understanding what your data is telling you, and then I know forcing adherence is it doesn't mean anything, so you can't force adherence, but developing processes and enablement and sales manager buy-in in a way that you can gain adherence. That's it for me.
So, Alice, what I'm hearing is KPI should be very numbers oriented. So you pick a number you want to influence. It can be process adherence, it can be forecasting accuracy, it can be CRM hygiene, it can come in a multitude of ways, but it has to tie into a number. Because I think what you're saying is the allure of projects completed is very easy to fall to, which is, oh, I did these 3 things. And then I moved on to the next. But if those 3 things did not move the core KPI of the company, then I think you haven't been successful. one thing then I will say to everyone who is listening in, it was very interesting to see that the number of people who picked sales rep productivity as their top burning problem was less than I think 15%. And that is the disconnect, by the way, because if we were to do this webinar with a primary sales audience, you know, the first thing that they will pick more than 80% will be lower rep productivity. And I'm talking about quota attainment. So I think that's where RevOps has to be aligned to what sales cares about. It's the age-old debate of sales versus marketing. So sales cares about revenue, and then marketing typically has cared about number of leads or top of the funnel. But now marketing is moving towards revenue as well, for them to be aligned. And I think that's what sales and RevOps needs here as well. I know that David and Connor, you have your own thoughts, but if it's okay, we'll just go to Q&A. There are some really amazing tactical things that we can knock out quickly. So let me just say the question, and then I'll pick one of our panelists to answer that. So the first is, which is very meaty, which is typically, how do you influence strategy when the pushback that you get from sales is you haven't done sales yourself? You haven't lived in my shoes. Who are you to tell me what to do? Alice, if I can come to you for that, how do you counter that?
I mean, part of it, you know, I now have the benefit of having done sales ops and revenue operations for a long time, but it came from a long time of, I mean, this is going to sound very cliched, but like really listening to salespeople. Like, I don't know how hard it is to sell. I don't know what the challenges are. So if they come to me and say, this is unreasonable, you're asking me to do whatever, like, okay, tell me more. Why? What is the act? And like, you know, really listen to the, like you were saying, you know, don't come to me, don't solution for me, but tell me your problem. And understanding why certain things that, and I, you know, that somebody said earlier, like RevOps used to be for RevOps, like I need a lot of data, like I'm going to put all these fields in because I want to track stuff. Making it, listening to sales to understand why that's not working for them, why they're not filling in fields, why being forced to fill in this field because of a validation rule is messing with their ability to continue a sales cycle. So at this point, I feel like the best compliment I ever got in my career was in my last job, where one of the salespeople came to me after a year and was like, I just checked your background. You've never been in sales. What? And because you just, like, after enough time, I get the cred from listening to them and like really putting myself in their shoes. And I'm not building processes for me. I'm building processes to how can I make sales be successful? It is a really, really hard job. So what can I do to enable them to hit their quota? Because it is tough. So I come at everything with that frame.
I love the framework of salespeople are your customers. And you can learn a lot about your customers, whether you have been in that situation or not. But obviously, if you treat them as customers, then you will become experts at them. Connor, if I can ask you a very interesting question on, and I know that you and I have discussed this before, is how do you feel about sales enablement function on the RevOps team?
Yeah, I would say in my past career experience, it was very siloed, whereas like I didn't even work with the sales enablement team. You know, and now that I have all of those teams underneath me, I really am seeing the importance of it. And so to me, I would say, especially in a smaller organization, I think it's probably now realizing it's one of the more underinvested in functions, and ultimately tying that in with your analytics and your strategy teams and your operational teams is really key. Because if you have a disconnected learning path versus the actual sales plays or strategy you want to go after, you're going to only be confusing the sales team and not really going after your shared goal. So like to me, it's been one of the biggest learnings this year, and something that I'm heavily investing in and going to make, probably one of my top priorities in 2024 is driving prescriptive enablement, which really combines all of these functions. And enablement is a vehicle for learning, but ultimately there's many connections along that way to make the content of that learning and the goals of that learning directly tied to the outcomes we want to deliver.
I love that, which is enablement is so underinvested. And then now you have to bring enablement and ops and all the other functions on the same level, so that you can deliver a consistent prescriptive experience for your AEs who have just too much going on. You know what it feels like then? All of these issues are related. The challenge of ad hoc process adherence, CRM hygiene, KPIs, and I think it's alignment that would solve most of it. But we'll see as RevOps evolves. David, I'll come to you for the last question here, which is what advice would you give to the 1/3 of the companies who do not even have a RevOps function? How can they go about make this case to their sales leaders that they need a unified RevOps function?
Yeah, I think I saw this question and I was thinking about it from two different angles. One is, if you go to your executive team right now and talk about cost savings, there's just music to people's ears. So I think that there's a lot of cost savings that can be had when you consolidate those three departments in a few ways. One is you're actually going to need less of a tech stack because you're going to find there's a lot of overlap, things that shouldn't have been purchased. And so you can consolidate there. You're also going to find that there's maybe a need for less people. When you go from 3 teams of 3, you might be able to go to 1 team of 7, 1 team of 8. And I'm definitely not advocating for making teams smaller, but that might happen over time, and you might decide, we're doing okay because this one person now is covering all these things. And that cost savings is before we get to any of the productivity gains. And as Connor said, he's seen success consolidating strategy and enablement. And I think that there is definitely, the first case is consolidating CS ops and sales ops. And then I'd latch on marketing ops. The productivity gains as you move through that dynamic, it's significant. And so that might be hard for your executive team to see, but they'll definitely see cost savings as an immediate gain.
And I think the counterintuitive thing, David, there is, which is you always have to integrate sales and CS ops and then bring in marketing ops. It feels that bringing sales and marketing together and then bringing CS ops would be the winning function. But I have always seen that when you start with sales and CS, you get the immediate benefit and then layering on marketing ops. This was an amazing conversation. I know that there are probably 8 other questions that we weren't able to get to, but here's what we'll do. For people who's asked the question from their own name and non-anonymously, we'll get the response from Connor, David, and Alice to your question, and then we'll share that in the post email, in the post webinar email. There was another question on how do you go about finding mentors. I think you have 3 amazing mentors on this panel here, right here, and I just put them on the spot, so they will become amazing mentors. And what we'll do is we'll share the LinkedIn and Twitter profiles in the post webinar email, and then I think you should connect with them. Speaking from experience, these are some of the smartest people in RevOps that I know, and hopefully from the depth of this conversation, you would have seen that these are amazing folks. And I think that's a good starting point. And then for more events like this, Rob will share a link for all the upcoming events. We have an in-person dinner in San Francisco, New York, London. We have a conference in Chicago where you can find us. So go to this link and see if you have any event that you can participate in. But Connor, David, and Alice, thank you so much for doing this. It was an amazing conversation. I feel like we could have gone on for 3 hours and then another hour for Q&A. And maybe one day we'll make time for a longer roundtable and record that and share that with the world. But this was amazing. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and being so open on this conversation.
Thanks, Rattle, for organizing. Thanks, Sahil. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.